On the most important day of my life, a familiar face appeared, one I swore I'd never see again. Their presence wasn't just a surprise. It was a bombshell that threatened to unravel everything. You won't believe who crashed my wedding and the shocking reason why they showed up. Chapter 1. The Glass Chapel. Have you ever felt a storm gathering not in the sky, but beneath your own skin, knowing the lightning it brings is the one man you swore you'd never have to face again? That was me, on my wedding day. The silk of my dress felt like a cage, beautiful and white and suffocating. Every mirror showed me a bride, a perfect, smiling lie. Outside the tall glass walls of the chapel, the sky had turned a bruised purple. It wasn't supposed to rain in September. Not like this. Not with a wind that seemed to howl my name. My fingers trembled as I adjusted the veil. It was just weather, I told myself. Nerves. Every bride gets nervous. But this feeling wasn't just jitters. It was a cold dread, a primal hum beneath my skin that had nothing to do with marrying the kindest man I'd ever known. It was the echo of a different life, a world of moonlight and violence I had fought so hard to escape. This wedding. This was my fortress, my final wall against the past. A gust of wind slammed against the chapel, making the enormous panes of glass tremble. The lights inside flickered for a second. My heart leaped into my throat. Liam found me staring out at the angry sky. He was my calm, my quiet harbor. Human. Perfectly, wonderfully human. He didn't smell of pine and wild earth. He smelled of soap and the faint, clean scent of his architect's office. He slid his arms around my waist from behind, his chin resting on my shoulder. "Hey," he murmured into my ear, his voice a soothing balm. "Worried about a little rain? They say it's good luck." I tried to smile, to turn into his warmth, but my body was stiff, a statue carved from ice. "It just came out of nowhere, Liam." His lips brushed against my neck. "Maybe it's for drama. A grand entrance for Mrs. Thorne." I wanted that name more than anything. Maya Thorne. It sounded safe. It sounded normal. Not Maya Eldridge, the Omega who was cast aside, the girl who wasn't enough. "I love you," I whispered, and it was true. I did love him. I loved his gentleness, his patience, the way his eyes never held a hint of a predator. He was everything he wasn't. Consequently, my love for Liam was a carefully constructed thing, built brick by brick over the ruins of my past because I needed its shelter so desperately. He squeezed me gently. "I love you more. Ready to make it official?" I nodded, even as my wolf, the part of me I kept starved and silent in a deep, dark corner of my soul, paced restlessly. It tasted the ozone in the air. It felt the shift in pressure. "Danger," it whimpered. "He is coming." I pushed the feeling down, hard. It was just a storm. It had to be. My past couldn't reach me here. "More than ready," I lied, forcing a bright, brittle smile onto my face. Liam's own smile was pure sunshine, utterly oblivious to the shadows clinging to me. He didn't know about the bite mark that never fully faded from my shoulder, hidden beneath layers of silk. He didn't know that my nightmares weren't just bad dreams, but memories. He believed my family had died in a tragic accident, because the truth was something a man like him could never comprehend. The truth was that I had been exiled, left with nothing but a shattered heart and a soul that felt permanently stained. My father was supposed to walk me down the aisle. Instead, it was Liam's dad, a kind man with a warm smile who patted my hand and told me I looked like an angel. But as we stood at the back of the chapel, the organ beginning to play its gentle song, a flicker of pain, sharp and hot like a lit match against my skin, arced across my chest. I gasped, my hand flying to the spot. It wasn't a heart attack. I knew this feeling. It was a ghost, a phantom limb I hadn't felt in 5 long years. The bond, The cursed, severed, agonizing mate bond. It was impossible. It was gone. He broke it. He had shattered it in front of everyone. Another flicker, stronger this time, and it felt like a string in my soul being plucked, a note of pure agony that made my vision swim. Why now? After all this silence? Why today of all days? The music swelled, the guests stood, and Liam's dad gave my arm a gentle tug. It was time. As I took my first step down the long white aisle towards my safe human future, a single deafening crack of thunder shook the entire world, and the phantom pain in my chest exploded into a raging fire. Chapter 2. An Alpha's Echo. Every step down that aisle was a step through time. The scent of roses and rain from the chapel faded, replaced by the smell of damp earth and the metallic tang of bloodlust. The gentle organ music dissolved into the jeering laughter of 100 wolves. I wasn't in a white dress anymore. I was 19 again, standing in the mud of the proving grounds, my thin tunic soaked with a nervous sweat. It was the night of the mating moon, the night my fate was supposed to be sealed. The night Dante, the pack's new fearsome alpha, would claim me as his. I had been his since we were children. The pull was undeniable, a force of nature like gravity or time. Everyone knew it. I had spent my entire life dreaming of the moment he would finally mark me, when the burning ache of our bond would settle into a blissful hum. His father had arranged it. His mother had smiled upon it. Our destiny was written in the stars, they said, but stars can fall. When my name was called, I walked into the center of the circle, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. I saw him standing there, his power rolling off him in palpable waves, a living storm of muscle and dominance. His eyes, the color of molten gold, found mine. And they were cold. So cold. There was no warmth, no love, no recognition of the girl who had followed him through the woods, who had patched his cuts, who had loved him with every fiber of her being. This wasn't the Dante I knew. This was an alpha, a stranger. The pack's elder, Lyra, began the ritual. Alpha Dante, son of Marcus, the moon goddess has blessed you with your true mate. Do you accept Maya Eldridge as your fated, your Luna, your other half? The silence that followed was a living thing. It stretched and strained, thick with confusion. The claiming was a formality, a celebration. It was never a choice. I saw the muscles in his jaw clench, a vein throbbing in his temple. His gaze swept over me, dismissive and sharp, as if he were inspecting livestock. He saw my trembling hands, my slender frame, my hopeful, terrified face. He saw an omega, not a queen, not an equal. Finally he spoke, his voice not a loving whisper meant for me, but a booming proclamation meant for the entire pack. A voice that would echo in my nightmares for years to come. No. The word was a cannon blast, a physical blow. The crowd gasped. Lyra's eyes widened in shock. My world tilted on its axis. He took a step forward, his golden eyes blazing with a cruel fire I'd never seen before. I, Dante Blackwood, Alpha of the Blood Moon Pack, reject this union. He didn't just say it, he roared it. He let his power, his raw alpha dominance, slam into the words, infusing them with the force of a command. She is weak. An omega. My pack needs a strong Luna, a warrior to stand by my side, not a shadow who will hide behind my back. The Blood Moon Pack will not be led by a half measure. Half measure. The word struck me harder than any physical blow ever could. He wasn't just rejecting me as a mate, he was declaring me worthless. Unfit. Not enough. Because a public rejection was the ultimate shame. It was a brand on the soul that declared you fundamentally broken. It told the world that the goddess herself had made a mistake. The mate bond between us, that burning, beautiful thing, flared in agony. It felt like he'd plunged his hand into my chest and was tearing my soul in two. He then sealed my fate with a final, brutal act. He looked right at me, his face a mask of stone, and uttered the ancient words of severance. The power that flowed from him was a black tide, crashing into me and the bond. It didn't just break. It shattered. The pain was indescribable. A supernova of agony that ripped a scream from my throat as I collapsed into the mud, my entire being consumed by a loss so profound it felt like death itself. I was no longer his. I was nothing. The last thing I saw before darkness took me was his back, as he turned and walked away without a single glance behind him. The memory shattered as my vision refocused. I was here, in the chapel, standing across from Liam, his face etched with concern. The officiant had paused, waiting. "Maya," Liam whispered, his thumb rubbing gentle circles on my hand. "Are you okay?" I blinked, forcing the tears back. I was not that broken girl in the mud. I had survived. I had rebuilt myself from ash and bone. I was stronger now. "I'm fine," I breathed, the lie tasting like ash on my tongue. Perfectly fine. This was my victory. This was my proof that I didn't need him, or a bond, or any of it. This was my happily ever after, and no ghost from the past was going to take it from me. Chapter 3, The Uninvited. "I am more than fine," I repeated, my voice gaining a sliver of strength. I met Liam's worried gaze and gave him a smile I hoped didn't look as fragile as it felt. Just overwhelmed. It's all so beautiful. He visibly relaxed, his own smile returning, because it was easy for him to believe the simple thing, the happy thing. That was his world, a world without hidden monsters or broken souls. The officiant, a kind-faced woman, cleared her throat and continued, "And do you, Liam, take Maya to be your lawfully wedded wife?" His voice was strong and clear, full of a certainty I would have killed for. "I do." He said the words so easily. He squeezed my hand, his eyes shining with a love so pure and uncomplicated it almost hurt to look at. Now it was my turn. My moment of triumph. The final nail in the coffin of my past. The officiant's gentle eyes turned to me. "And do you, Maya?" The fire in my chest surged. It was no longer a flicker or a spark, but a searing, twisting inferno. A rope, pulling me, yanking me backward toward a memory I refused to relive. It felt like a physical presence in the room, a third person standing at the altar with us, unseen but overwhelmingly powerful. The storm outside raged in perfect sync with the tempest inside me. Rain hammered against the glass walls as if trying to break in. My mouth went dry. The words were right there. 2 simple syllables. I do. But they wouldn't come out. My throat closed up, strangled by a force that wasn't my own. My wolf, that dormant, pathetic creature, was howling now, a cry of terror and recognition. Liam's smile faltered. "Maya?" He whispered again, his grip on my hands tightening. Panic began to cloud his clear blue eyes. The guests were murmuring. A low rumble of confusion rippled through the pews. I tried to speak. I opened my lips, but only a choked little gasp escaped. The burning in my chest was unbearable now, a homing beacon screaming into the void. And something was answering. Just as the officiant gently prompted, "My dear?" A colossal boom of thunder exploded directly overhead. It wasn't just loud, it was violent. The entire chapel shook on its foundations, the glass walls groaning under the strain. The lights flickered wildly, then died, plunging the entire room into a dim gray twilight lit only by the strobing flashes of lightning outside. Screams erupted from the guests. Liam instinctively pulled me closer, shielding me with his body. "It's okay. It's just the storm," he shouted, trying to project a calm he obviously didn't feel. But it wasn't just the storm. I knew it. In the deepest, most terrified part of my soul, I knew it. And then it happened. The grand oak doors at the back of the chapel, doors that took 2 men to open, burst inward. They didn't swing. They exploded from their hinges, ripped away by a force that was not human. Wood splintered, flying through the air as a furious roaring wind and a torrent of rain flooded the entrance. The screams of the guests turned to shrieks of pure terror. Everyone scrambled back, away from the gaping, dark maw where the doors used to be. For a moment, there was nothing but the howling wind and the terrified gasps of the crowd. Then a figure stepped through the ruined doorway. He was a silhouette at first, a tall, broad shape framed by the raging storm behind him. Lightning flashed, illuminating him for a frozen heartbeat. He was drenched, his black hair plastered to his forehead, his tailored black suit soaked and clinging to a body that was pure predator. Rainwater streamed down a face carved from granite and fury. But it was his eyes I saw first. Across the entire length of the chapel, I saw them. Golden, blazing with an impossible, inhuman light. They weren't looking at the terrified crowd. They weren't looking at my terrified fiancé. They were locked on me. Silence fell. A dead, heavy quiet that was more terrifying than the screams. Every person in that room was frozen, staring at the impossible man who commanded the storm itself. He took a step inside, his expensive shoes squelching on the marble floor. Another step. He moved with a liquid grace, a chilling purpose that made my blood run cold. He was a wolf stalking into a sheep pen, and his gaze never, ever left mine. The fire in my chest was a supernova. The mate bond, the one he had shattered, the one that should be dead and buried, was screaming his name. Dante. My lips formed the name, but no sound came out. My past hadn't just reached me. It had kicked down the door. It had come to drag me back into the hell I had clawed my way out of. And as he stood there, the alpha who had rejected me, the monster from my nightmares made real, he let a low, rumbling sound escape his chest. It wasn't a word. It was a growl. A possessive, furious, unmistakable sound of a predator that had finally found its prey. Chapter 4. The Vowbreaker. The growl echoed in the sudden, dead silence of the chapel. It was a sound that didn't belong here, a primal, guttural noise that vibrated in my bones and sent a wave of pure terror through the human guests. Liam, bless his brave and foolish heart, stepped in front of me. His body was a shield, but I knew it was a shield made of paper against a hurricane. "Who the hell are you?" he demanded, his voice tight with adrenaline. "The wedding's over. You need to leave. Now." Dante's golden eyes didn't even flicker toward Liam. It was as if he didn't exist. His entire being, his entire world, was focused only on me. The intensity of his gaze was a physical weight, pinning me in place. He took a step forward and the air crackled with a power that had every hair on my body standing on end. People instinctively shrank away from him, a collective gasp rippling through the room because they felt it too. The oppressive aura of a predator. He was the wolf, and we were all just sheep. That raw, untamed power finally broke through my shock, igniting a fury that had been simmering for 5 long years. "Get out!" I hissed, my voice shaking with rage. I pushed past Liam's protective arm, my white dress feeling like a costume for a girl I no longer was. "You have no right to be here. You lost that right a long time ago." A muscle jumped in his jaw. His lips curled back in something that was almost a snarl. "Right? You will speak to me about rights? You stand here in this ridiculous white dress, trying to bind yourself to this." He gestured dismissively at Liam, the word dripping with contempt, while our bond screams in my head. I laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. "What bond? You shattered it. You destroyed it in front of everyone and left me with nothing." I was screaming now, all my carefully constructed composure gone, all the pain, all the humiliation, boiling over. "You don't get to come back. You don't get to ruin this for me, too." "Ruin it?" He took another step, his voice dropping to a dangerously low growl. "You were mine, Maya. You are still mine. No pathetic human ritual can change that." Liam squared his shoulders. "She is my wife. You will show her some respect." Dante finally turned his head, a slow, deliberate movement. He looked Liam up and down, and a cruel, humorless smile touched his lips. It was the most terrifying expression I had ever seen. "Your wife?" he mused, the words laced with dark amusement. You have no idea what she is, or what belongs to me." He was about to take another step when it happened. A sound unlike the thunder from before, the sharp, explosive crash of shattering glass. Not from the doors, from the towering glass walls on either side of the chapel. Suddenly, the storm was inside. Wind and rain blasted through the new openings as dark figures scrambled through the broken panes. They were dressed in rags, moving with a hunched, animalistic speed. Their eyes glowed with a faint, hungry light in the dim chapel. Their teeth were too long, too sharp. Rogues. My blood ran cold. This wasn't a coincidence. This was an attack. Panic erupted. The guests' screams were no longer from shock, but from pure, mortal terror, as the feral intruders lunged into the crowd, their snarls mixing with the terrified cries of men and women. The wedding had turned into a slaughterhouse. Chapter 5. A savage savior chaos was a whirlwind of screams and snarling. The rogues were brutal, tearing through the terrified guests like predators in a field of lambs. Liam shoved me behind him, grabbing a heavy silver candle holder from a nearby table. "Stay back!" he yelled, swinging it wildly at a rogue that lunged for us. The creature, a lanky man with crazed eyes, just laughed and knocked the makeshift weapon from his hand with a flick of its wrist, sending Liam stumbling backward. He was so human, so fragile. The rogue's eyes landed on me, and a hungry grin stretched its face. It licked its lips and took a step forward, sniffing the air. "The Alpha's little Omega," it rasped, its voice like grinding stones. My heart hammered against my ribs. I was frozen, trapped by the same terror that had paralyzed me 5 years ago. This was it. This was how I died. But before the creature could take another step, a black blur shot past me. It was Dante. He moved with a speed that wasn't possible, an impossible, fluid grace that the human eye could barely follow. He slammed into the rogue, and the sound of the impact was a sickening crunch of bone. This wasn't a fight between men. This was different. Dante's hands weren't hands anymore. His fingers were tipped with black, curved claws that tore through the rogue's ragged clothes and flesh beneath. His face was a mask of cold fury, his teeth slightly elongated, his golden eyes glowing with a terrifying feral light. A low growl rumbled constantly in his chest as he fought. He was a force of nature, a controlled storm of violence. He broke one rogue's arm with a casual twist, then spun and drove his claws into the chest of another that tried to flank him. He was shielding me, always keeping his body between me and the attackers, a living wall of fury. Liam watched from where he'd fallen, his face pale with a horror that went beyond the violence. He was seeing what Dante truly was. He was seeing the monster I had tried to pretend didn't exist. The leader of the rogues, a bigger, more scarred wolf, saw his men falling. He let out a furious roar and pointed a clawed finger at Dante. His voice was a guttural shout that cut through the chaos. "The prophecy ends with you, Blackwood. We'll take the vessel before you can use her for the ritual." Vessel? Prophecy? The words made no sense, a confusing jumble in my terror-stricken mind. Dante didn't even seem to register the words. His only focus was the threat. He met the leader's charge with a roar of his own, and their clash was a whirlwind of claws and teeth and guttural snarls. It was over in seconds. Dante was stronger, faster, more ruthless. He threw the leader through the shattered remains of the altar and stood over him, his chest heaving. Blood dripped from his claws onto the white silk runner of the aisle. He wasn't even breathing hard. One by one, the remaining rogues saw their leader fall, and with fearful yelps, they scrambled back out through the broken windows, vanishing into the storm. The chapel fell silent again, punctuated only by the weeping of the injured guests and the ragged sound of my own breathing. Dante stood there for a long moment, the feral light in his eyes slowly receding, the claws retracting back into human-looking fingers. He slowly turned, his blood-splattered suit and furious gaze a terrifying sight in the middle of my ruined wedding. He looked at the chaos, at the crying guests, at a terrified Liam, and then his burning, possessive eyes landed back on me. He wasn't just my savior. He was the most dangerous thing in the room. Chapter 6. The Alpha's Claim. The wail of distant sirens finally cut through the stunned silence. Paramedics and police were coming. Normalcy was trying to claw its way back into this nightmare. Liam scrambled to his feet and rushed to my side, pulling me away from Dante as if he were made of fire. Maya. My God. What was that? He whispered, his hands trembling as they checked me for injuries. But his eyes kept darting back to Dante, wide with a terror that was deeper than just the shock of the attack. It was a fundamental instinctual fear, the fear of prey for a predator. Who is he? He asked, his voice barely audible. He was looking at the man who had just saved our lives, but all he could see was a monster. My safe little world, the one I had so carefully built with Liam, had just been torn to shreds because you can't build a house of sticks and pretend the wolf isn't real. The foundation of our relationship was a lie, and that lie had just been exposed in the most brutal way possible. Dante ignored the question, his attention fixed on me. He took a step closer, his authority settling back over him like a cloak. It's over. You're coming with me. I recoiled, pressing myself back against Liam. No, I choked out. I'm not going anywhere with you. Look what you did. You brought this madness here. I clung to Liam's arm, my only anchor in a world that had suddenly tilted on its axis. I'm staying with my fiancé. At the word fiancé, a muscle in Dante's jaw tightened. He cannot protect you, Dante stated, his voice flat and cold. It wasn't an opinion. It was a fact. We had all just witnessed the proof. They called you a vessel. They spoke of a prophecy. You are not safe here. You are not safe anywhere but with me. I would rather be unsafe than be with you, I screamed, the words tearing from my throat. Liam, please, don't let him take me. I looked at Liam, my eyes pleading with him to be the man I wanted him to be, the protector, my safe harbor. But he couldn't meet my gaze. His eyes were locked on Dante, and all I saw in them was fear and a dawning, horrified understanding. He had seen a man tear others apart with his bare hands. He couldn't fight that. He knew it. And in that moment, I saw our future crumble to dust. The safety he offered was an illusion. Dante didn't wait for an argument. He seemed to know he had already won. With a sigh that sounded almost bored, he closed the distance between us in 2 long strides. Liam flinched back instinctively. Dante didn't even look at him. He simply bent down and slid one arm under my knees and the other around my back, lifting me into his arms as if I weighed nothing at all. No! I shrieked, struggling, beating my fists against his chest. It was like hitting a stone wall. Let me go! Liam, do something, please! Liam just stood there, pale and trembling, his mouth opening and closing with no sound coming out. He was helpless, broken. The last shred of my hope died right there. Dante turned and carried me out of the ruined chapel, away from my weeping guests, away from the man I was supposed to marry. He strode through the pouring rain, unaffected by the storm he seemed to command, and stopped at a sleek black car that looked as menacing as he did. He opened the passenger door and placed me inside, his movements firm, but not rough. As he slid into the driver's seat beside me, the confined space amplified his presence, his scent, rain, blood, and wild, untamed power. The close proximity made the bond flare, but it wasn't a pleasant warmth. It was a punishment, a searing, agonizing burn that radiated from my chest, a constant, fiery reminder of his rejection and my betrayal. He started the engine, and as the car sped away into the stormy darkness, he finally looked at me. His golden eyes were cold, holding no apology, no softness, only the grim, possessive light of ownership. You should have never tried to run from me. Chapter 7. The Gilded Cage. I woke up to the smell of wood smoke and pine. My head was throbbing, a dull ache behind my eyes. For a wild, hopeful second, I thought maybe it had all been a dream, a horrible, twisted nightmare brought on by wedding day nerves. Then I opened my eyes. I was not in the honeymoon suite with Liam. I was in a vast bedroom, lying on a bed big enough for 4 people, covered by a heavy fur blanket. The room was beautiful, all dark wood and stone, with a fireplace crackling in the corner. But the beauty was a lie. I scrambled out of bed and rushed to the floor-to-ceiling windows. Outside, a dense, ancient forest pressed in on all sides, the trees so thick they blotted out the sky. And woven into the glass itself were delicate but unmistakable bars of black iron, twisted to look like vines. It wasn't a bedroom. It was a cage. A gilded, luxurious cage. My wedding dress was gone, replaced by a simple, soft tunic and leggings. A fresh wave of fury and violation washed over me. He had stripped me, changed me. My heart hammered against my ribs. I had to get out. The bedroom door was unlocked. Hope, fragile and stupid, fluttered in my chest. I crept out into a massive hallway, silent as a ghost. The house was like a hunting lodge for giants, with huge exposed beams and the heads of massive, unearthly-looking animals mounted on the walls. I followed the sound of voices downstairs, my bare feet cold against the polished wood floor. I paused at the top of a grand staircase, looking down into a cavernous living space. A fire roared in a stone hearth the size of a car, and everywhere, there were people. Dozens of them. They lounged on leather couches, talked in quiet groups, and sharpened knives by the fire. Dante's pack. As if sensing me, one of them looked up. Then another, and another. In seconds, every single pair of eyes in the room was fixed on me. The conversation died. The air grew thick with a hostility so heavy I could taste it. By the fireplace, 2 massive timber wolves, not decorations, but living, breathing creatures, lifted their heads, their lips peeled back from their teeth in silent, rumbling snarls. This was his territory, and I was the intruder. "Come down, Maya." Dante's voice cut through the silence. He emerged from a doorway I hadn't noticed, holding a cup of coffee. He was dressed in a simple black shirt and jeans now, the blood and rain gone. He looked less like a monster, and more like the man I used to know, which was somehow even more terrifying. I didn't move. My hand tightened on the wooden railing. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to hide. "I'm not hungry," I said, my voice coming out as a defiant squeak. He just raised an eyebrow. "That wasn't an invitation, it was an order. You will eat. You will regain your strength." "So I can be a better prisoner?" I shot back, my fear making me reckless. His jaw tightened. "So you can survive what's coming." He took a step toward the stairs, and I flinched back. My defiance, my stupid, pointless defiance, poked the bear. His control, so absolute just a moment ago, fractured. His golden eyes began to glow, the pupils narrowing into slits. A low, guttural growl escaped his lips, a sound that came from deep in his chest, from the beast he held chained inside. He stopped, his hand slamming against the wall beside him to steady himself. He squeezed his eyes shut, his whole body trembling with the effort of holding himself back. He was fighting his own wolf, fighting it from lunging up the stairs and dragging me down. The pack members watched, their expressions a mixture of fear for him and hatred for me. I was the cause. My presence was making their alpha unstable. In that moment, I saw it. A crack in his perfect, unbreakable armor. He was powerful, yes, but he was not in control. And his weakness, it was somehow connected to me. Chapter 8. Poison and Medicine. He eventually won the war with himself. The feral glow faded from Dante's eyes, and he straightened up, his face a cold, unreadable mask again. But the moment had changed something. The air was still thick with tension, but now it was laced with a thread of confusion. He didn't say another word, just turned and walked away, leaving me standing on the stairs, a pariah in a room full of predators. No one spoke to me. No one even looked at me for too long. I was a ghost at the feast, an unwelcome specter haunting their alpha. I finally crept down the stairs, my hunger a gnawing ache in my stomach. I grabbed a piece of bread from a long wooden table, ready to retreat back to my cage. As I turned, I scraped my arm against the jagged edge of a metal bowl, a stupid, clumsy accident. A thin line of red welled up on my skin, the sting sharp and surprising. Before I could even react, a hand shot out and grabbed my wrist. It was Dante. His grip was like steel. "What happened?" he growled, his eyes fixed on the small cut. "Did someone touch you?" "I scraped it," I snapped, trying to pull my arm away. "It's none of your business." He ignored me, his thumb brushing over the cut. A bizarre jolt shot up my arm. It was a strange, contradictory sensation. The agonizing burn of the broken bond was still there, a constant fire under my skin wherever he touched me. But beneath that pain was something else. A warm, soothing tingle, like honey and sunlight. I watched in stunned silence as the skin on my arm seemed to shift. The edges of the cut softened, pulling together, the angry red fading to a pale pink line in a matter of seconds. It was almost healed. We both stared at it, frozen. What was this? Our bond was broken, a source of torment. Yet here it was, a paradox in the flesh. It was poison, and it was medicine. "Alpha." The voice was sharp and disapproving. A man stepped forward from the crowd. He was tall, with cold, intelligent eyes and a face that looked like it had never known a smile. He was the only one in the room who didn't seem afraid of Dante. "You need to explain this," the man said, his gaze flicking to me with undisguised contempt. "Why is she here?" Dante released my arm, turning to face him. "My decisions are not yours to question, Kyle." Kyle, the name registered. His beta. His second in command. Kyle took a step closer, lowering his voice, but it was still filled with challenge. "You bring this Omega into our home, the one who shamed you, the one who tried to mate a human, when rogues are hunting her? They mentioned a prophecy, Dante. The pack is whispering. They say she's a bad omen, a weakness." The word hung in the air between them. Weakness, the same word Dante had used to cast me aside. The ultimate insult. And now his own beta was using it against him. Dante's posture didn't change, but the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. His voice was lethally quiet when he spoke. "She is here because I command it. She is under my protection. Anyone who makes her feel unwelcome will answer directly to me." The threat was unmistakable. "This is our home, not your personal kennel," Kale shot back, his own anger flaring. "She will be the death of us all." "That is enough!" Dante's roar shook the room, his alpha power slamming into everyone, forcing them to lower their heads in submission. Kyle flinched, but he didn't look away. He held Dante's gaze for a long, tense moment. Finally, with a barely perceptible nod, he backed down, but not before his cold eyes met mine one last time. It wasn't just a look of dislike. It was a promise that if Dante wouldn't get rid of me, he would. Chapter 9. The Desperate Betrayal. The tension in the pack house was a knife's edge. Kyle's challenge had exposed a crack in Dante's authority, and I was the wedge being driven into it. Dante clearly didn't trust leaving me alone in the house, a lamb surrounded by simmering wolves. So when he had to inspect the perimeter defenses after the rogue's attack, he grabbed my arm and dragged me along with him. "Stay where I can see you," he growled, his mood even fouler than before. We walked in tense silence through the enormous ancient forest that surrounded the house. The air was cool and clean, smelling of damp earth and pine. For a moment, it felt like when we were kids, exploring these same woods. But the innocence was gone, replaced by a heavy, suffocating history. I kept my distance, watching his broad back as he moved. He was a part of this forest, belonging here in a way I never would again. My thoughts drifted to Liam. Was he okay? Was he looking for me? The hope was a painful ache in my chest. He was my one link to the life I had lost, the life I was desperate to get back to. We were in a small clearing when the world exploded. It was a blur of movement from the trees, a flash of ragged clothes, the glint of a knife. Rogues. There were only 3 of them, but they were fast and silent. They burst from the undergrowth, their target immediately clear. Me. My scream was swallowed by the suddenness of the attack. I didn't even have time to run. But Dante. His reaction wasn't a thought. It was an instinct. In the space of a single heartbeat, he spun, crossing the distance between us, and slammed into me, knocking me to the ground. He covered my body with his own, a solid, unmovable shield of muscle and fury as a rogue's claws raked across his back, tearing through his shirt. A guttural roar of pure rage was ripped from his throat. He was off me in an instant, a whirlwind of brutal, efficient violence. The fight was over before I could fully process that it had begun. He moved like a shadow, a predator in his element. There were no wasted movements, just the sickening sounds of snapping bones and choked cries. It was terrifying. And he had done it to protect me. An instinct he clearly hated. He stood panting over the last fallen rogue, his back bleeding freely. We dragged the one who was still breathing back to the house, locking him in a silver-lined cell in the basement. Dante shoved him against the wall. "Why are you hunting her? What is the prophecy?" he demanded. The rogue just laughed, blood staining his teeth. He spat on the floor. "The blood moon is coming, Alpha," he rasped, his eyes wild with a fanatic's zeal. "When the moon bleeds, so will the vessel. Her omega blood will cleanse the land, and a new Alpha will rise from your ashes." Before Dante could demand more, the rogue bit down hard on something in his mouth. His eyes rolled back and he collapsed, a faint smell of almonds in the air. Cyanide. He'd killed himself rather than talk. The cryptic words left me colder than before. Vessel. Omega blood. Cleanse the land. They wanted to sacrifice me. Later that night, I was locked back in my gilded cage. My mind was a chaotic mess of fear and confusion. I saw a small, sleek tablet sitting on the nightstand, something I hadn't noticed before. My breath caught. Could it be? I snatched it up. It was on, connected to a network. Hope, fierce and desperate, surged through me. My fingers shook as I opened a web browser. Chapel attack. News articles flooded the screen. I scanned them frantically, looking for any mention of Liam, any sign that he was okay. Then I saw it. A local news blog with pictures from the scene. The main photo was of the ruined chapel doors, but it was a smaller picture in the gallery that made my heart stop. It was a blurry shot, taken from a distance, of the area across the street after the attack. And there, standing half-hidden behind an old oak tree, was Liam. My Liam. His face was pale, his expression desperate, and he was talking to a man in ragged clothes, a man I recognized. It was one of the rogues from the chapel, one of the ones who had escaped. The image didn't make sense. My mind refused to process it. Liam? My safe, gentle, human Liam, making a deal with the monsters who had tried to kill us? The tablet slipped from my fingers, clattering onto the floor. It wasn't just a deal. It was a betrayal. A betrayal so deep and so cold, it hurt more than any rejection ever could. Chapter 10. A dying beast. The image on the screen burned itself into my mind. Liam. My gentle, safe, human Liam, talking to a monster in the shadows. The heartbreak was a strange, hollow thing, not the fiery agony Dante had inflicted, but a cold, creeping numbness. The man who was supposed to be my escape from the world of predators had just thrown me back to them. That cold numbness slowly hardened into a diamond-sharp point of rage. I was done being a pawn. I was done being a victim. I needed answers, all of them. I stormed out of the bedroom, my bare feet silent on the cold stone floors, the tablet clutched in my hand like a weapon. I found Dante in a large, book-lined study, staring into a fireplace. He looked exhausted, the weight of the world on his shoulders. I didn't care. I threw the tablet onto the massive oak desk between us. It skidded across the polished surface, the picture of Liam's betrayal glowing up at him. "He's working with them," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "The man I was going to marry. The reason I was in that chapel. He is talking to the same creatures who tried to kill us." Dante's eyes flickered to the screen, his expression tightening into something dark and dangerous, but he said nothing. "They called me a vessel," I continued, stalking around the desk toward him. "They talked about a prophecy. Your pack looks at me like I'm a disease, and you almost lost control of your own wolf because I defied you. No more lies, Dante. What is going on? What am I to you?" He turned from the fire to face me, and the raw pain in his golden eyes stole the air from my lungs. He looked broken. "You are the one who is killing me," he whispered, the words so soft I almost didn't hear them. I recoiled as if he had slapped me. "What?" "The bond," he said, his voice raspy. "An alpha's fated bond. It's not just about love, Maya. It's an anchor, a source of balance and strength. When a true fated bond is severed by an alpha's rejection, it doesn't just disappear, it poisons the one who broke it." He took a step closer, and for the first time, I saw the dark circles under his eyes, the faint tremor in his hand. "My wolf, it has been dying for 5 years. Slowly. Every day is a battle to keep it from consuming what's left of the man. Your presence, it's like a drop of water to a man dying of thirst. It stabilizes me. It's the only thing that silences the screaming inside my own head." The confession hung in the air, a shocking, impossible truth. He wasn't just my captor. He was my prisoner, chained to a slow death he had inflicted upon himself. All my rage, all my fury, was suddenly complicated by a thick, unwelcome wave of pity. He, the all-powerful alpha, needed me to survive. The power dynamic between us tilted, the lines of hate and need blurring into something confusing and raw. "You're lying," I whispered. But we both knew I was wrong. It was the truth. It explained the weakness I saw, the desperate possessiveness in his eyes. He saw the conflict on my face. "I know you hate me," he murmured, taking another step. He was so close now I could feel the heat radiating from his body. "You have every right. But when I am near you, it's the only time I feel whole." His hand came up, his fingers gently tracing the line of my jaw. The touch was electric, searing pain from the broken bond, but tangled with that strange, healing warmth from before. My breath hitched. All the years of hatred, the fresh betrayal, his shocking confession, it all swirled into a storm of emotion inside me. I should have pushed him away. I should have run. Instead, I leaned into his touch, my eyes fluttering shut. His head dipped down, and his lips met mine. The kiss wasn't gentle. It was a collision. A desperate, punishing crash of anger and need and 5 years of unspoken agony. It was the kiss of a dying beast, and God help me, I didn't fight it. Chapter 11. The cruelest truth. We broke apart, both of us gasping for air as if we had been drowning. The kiss was a brand, a searing mark of pain and passion that left my lips tingling and my soul in turmoil. It had answered nothing. It had only carved the question deeper into my heart. I stumbled back, the back of my knees hitting the leather couch. The moment of weakness was gone, replaced by a desperate, clawing need for the real truth. The pity I felt for him was a poison, and I wouldn't drink it. "Why?" The word was a raw tear in the silence of the room. "If you needed me, if you knew severing the bond would kill you, why did you do it? Why did you throw me away in front of everyone?" I looked at him, my eyes pleading for an answer that made sense of the cruelty, of the waste. "You called me weak, a half measure. You shamed me and broke me and left me for dead. Why?" Dante sank into the chair behind his desk, running a hand over his face. He looked older than I had ever seen him, utterly defeated. The alpha was gone, and only the man remained. "Because I was a fool," he said, his voice heavy with a self-loathing that seemed ancient. "An arrogant, proud, terrified fool." He looked up, and his golden eyes were haunted. "There is a prophecy, an old curse tied to my bloodline. It says that when the fated mate of a Blackwood Alpha is an Omega, she is destined to be a sacrifice. A vessel whose blood must be spilled on the night of the blood moon to strip the pack of its power, allowing a rival to rise." My blood ran cold. The vessel will be cleansed in blood. The rogue's words. "I heard whispers of it from the elders before my Alpha ceremony," he continued, his voice flat and dead. "They were afraid. They saw the bond between us, saw your Omega heritage, and they saw a doom for our people. They debated what to do, how to hide you, how to protect you." "Protect me?" I choked out a bitter laugh. "Is that what you call it?" "No," he said, his gaze dropping to his hands. "I call it the greatest mistake of my life. I was young. I had just become Alpha. I thought I was invincible. I thought I could outsmart a prophecy that was written in stone. I listened to their fears, and I came up with my own arrogant solution." He finally looked at me, and his expression was one of pure agony. "I didn't reject you because I thought you were weak, Maya. I rejected you because I knew you were the center of it all. I thought if I broke the bond, if I publicly shamed you and cast you out, I could make you worthless to the prophecy. I thought if you weren't my mate anymore, if you were gone, living in the human world, they would have no vessel to sacrifice. They would have no power over me or our pack." The room began to spin. Every word was a blow, rearranging the entire history of my pain. "I chose to be the monster," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I chose to hurt you, to shatter you, so that they couldn't. I chose to save your life by destroying it." The truth was 1,000 times worse than the lie I had believed for 5 years. He hadn't rejected me out of simple cruelty or pride. He had done it to save me. His brutal, life-destroying act of rejection had been a twisted, misguided, arrogant act of protection. He hadn't just thrown me away. He had sacrificed me in a different way, burning down my entire world in a desperate, failed attempt to keep me safe from the very fate that was now closing in on me. He had doomed me then, and he had doomed me now. The original wound, the one I had built my entire life around, was a lie. And this new truth, this cruel, unbearable truth, it broke me all over again. Chapter 12. 3 Coming Storms. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just walked out of the study, a zombie in my own body, and locked myself back in the bedroom. The truth was a cancer, eating me from the inside out. There was no comfort in it, no absolution. Only a deeper, more profound sense of being utterly, hopelessly alone. The man who had broken my heart had done it out of a twisted kind of love. The man who was supposed to be my safe new beginning had betrayed me to the monsters. I was a chess piece in a game I never even knew I was playing, and every single king and queen on the board was ready to sacrifice me to win. My life wasn't my own. It was a story being written by everyone else. Downstairs, the pack house was a powder keg. Dante's confession had left him raw and distracted, and his grip on the pack was slipping. Kyle saw his moment, and he took it. He moved among the pack members, his voice a low, venomous whisper. "Did you see him?" He'd murmur to a group of warriors. "He can barely control his own wolf. He brings his weakness here, and now our enemies are at the gate." He was a master of manipulation, stoking the fires of their fear. His words were validated when a patrol returned, shaken and carrying the body of one of their own. The scout had been found near the southern border, his throat torn out. Pinned to his chest with a sharpened piece of bone was a strip of bloody cloth. On it, a single symbol was drawn in ash, a stark red crescent moon. The rogues were not just coming, they were mocking them. The message was clear. We are here. We are watching. and we are not afraid." Kale used the death to hammer his point home. "The Alpha is distracted," he declared in the main hall, his voice ringing with false grief and righteous anger. "He is obsessed with a rejected Omega while our borders fall and our people die. How many more must we lose before he sees that she is a curse, that she will be our ruin?" His words found their mark. Fear was a more powerful motivator than loyalty. I could hear their raised, angry voices even through the thick wooden door of my room. They were turning on him, turning on me. And in a grimy, rain-slicked alley miles away, the final storm was gathering. Liam met with the scarred rogue leader, his face a mess of desperation and fear. "She's in there," Liam said, his voice trembling. "He took her. Is she okay?" The rogue leader gave a cruel, pitying smile. "He has her for the ritual. He plans to be the one to sacrifice her, to absorb her power for himself. A dark magic." It was a lie. A perfect, poisonous lie designed to twist Liam's love into a weapon. "You have to help me," Liam begged. "We have to get her out." "We will, little man," the rogue rasped, clapping a heavy hand on Liam's shoulder. "You just have to do one more thing for us. Tell us about the patrols, the guard rotations. Help us get inside, and we will free your precious Maya for you." Liam, seeing himself as a hero saving his love from a dark sorcerer, nodded eagerly. He was a sheep making a deal with wolves to save another sheep. The blood moon was in 3 days. I stared out from behind my iron-barred window, watching the sliver of a moon begin to swell in the night sky. I was trapped. Trapped in a house with a dying Alpha who had ruined my life to save it. Trapped with a hostile pack that now saw me as a death sentence. And outside, a horde of fanatics and the man I once loved were both closing in, each determined to save me in their own destructive way. There was no one to trust. There was nowhere left to run. Chapter 13. The Fear of a King. I sat on the edge of the bed, a statue carved from hollowed-out ice. The truth hadn't set me free. It had just built a new, more complicated prison around my heart. The door opened softly. It was Dante. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, his usual commanding presence replaced by a deep, weary brokenness. He knew his last confession hadn't been enough. It had been a reason, but it hadn't been an apology. He closed the door behind him, the quiet click echoing in the tense silence. "What I did," he began, his voice low and raspy, "was unforgivable. And the prophecy, it was only half of the reason." He walked over to the barred window, staring out into the dark woods. I had just become Alpha. I was 20 years old and held the lives of hundreds of wolves in my hands. I was terrified. Terrified of failing them. Terrified of not being as strong as my father. He finally turned to look at me, and his eyes were stripped of all pride, all arrogance. All that was left was a raw, aching vulnerability. "And I was terrified of you." I flinched. "Of me?" "Of what you meant to me," he clarified, his voice cracking. "The mate bond. For an Alpha, it is our greatest strength and our most profound weakness. It's a connection so deep, it gives another person the power to ruin you. I felt it, Maya. From the time we were children, I felt the pull. And it scared me more than any rival pack, more than any battle. To love you was to hand you a weapon pointed directly at my own heart. I was a coward. I saw the prophecy as an excuse, a noble reason to do the thing my own fear was screaming at me to do. Run." He took a hesitant step closer. "I told myself I was saving you, but I was also saving myself from the kind of love that would have brought me to my knees. It was the act of a boy, not a king." His words were a quiet rain on the hardened soil of my anger. The hate I had nurtured for 5 years began to dissolve, not into forgiveness, but into a sad, painful understanding. I was no longer looking at the monster who had destroyed me. I was looking at the terrified boy he had been, a boy who had made a terrible, life-altering mistake. Before I could find the words to respond, the door burst open. A warrior, one of the few who still looked at Dante with unwavering loyalty, stood there, panting. "Alpha," he gasped, "a message from the rogues." He held out a phone. On the screen was a picture that made my blood run cold. It was Liam. He was tied to a chair in some dark, grimy room, his face bruised and swollen, a trickle of blood coming from his lip. Beneath the image was a single line of text: "The human for the vessel. Sunset tonight. The old cannery. Liam." They had him. The rogues had taken the final piece of my old life, the final pawn in their sick game, and I knew, with a sickening certainty, that they had taken him to force my hand, to draw me out. Dante's head snapped up, the weary man gone, replaced in an instant by the furious, decisive Alpha. His eyes met mine, and in them I saw not a captor, but a partner in a war we were both losing. Chapter 14. A Bond of Battle. "It's a trap," Kyle snarled, pacing the main hall like a caged animal. "They want to lure you out, Alpha. Let the human die. He is nothing to us. She brought this mess here. Let her live with the consequences." Dante slammed a map of the territory down on the massive table. "I am not leaving anyone to those fanatics. We are going in." His voice left no room for argument. I stepped forward, my own fear a cold knot in my stomach. "I'm coming with you." Every head in the room turned to me. Kyle scoffed. "So the little Omega wants to play warrior?" Dante looked at me, a question in his eyes. "He is there because of me," I said, my voice steady. "He was my choice, and this is my fault. I'm not hiding anymore." A flicker of something, respect, maybe, passed through Dante's gaze. He gave a sharp nod. "Stay close." The plan was simple and desperate. Dante, myself, and a small team of his most loyal warriors would go in. We moved through the woods as dusk settled, the world turning to shades of gray and purple. The old cannery loomed by the river, a skeleton of rusted metal and broken windows. It smelled of decay and damp. Inside, it was a maze of shadows and machinery. We found Liam in a small office on the second floor, tied to a chair and barely conscious. As Dante's warriors began to cut him free, I felt it. A prickle on my skin, a shift in the air. "Dante," I whispered, and he was already turning, his senses screaming the same warning as mine. Our bond, that painful, confusing thing, was humming between us, a silent alarm system. For the first time, it felt like a strength. Rogues poured from the shadows. It was an ambush, just as Cale had predicted. But we were ready. Dante moved to my side, his body a shield. "Get him out of here!" he roared to his men. The fight was a blur of motion and sound. Dante was a force of nature, but I was not the same girl who had frozen in the chapel. My fear was still there, but now it was mixed with a cold, hard anger. While Dante held the main group at bay, I saw a rogue sneaking up behind one of his warriors. Without thinking, I grabbed a heavy metal pipe from the floor and swung it with all my might, catching the rogue across the back of the knees. He howled and collapsed. My heart was pounding, but I felt a fierce, exhilarating thrill. I was fighting back. We were almost clear, dragging a groggy Liam toward an exit, when a new wave of rogues appeared, blocking our path. There were too many. We were trapped. Suddenly, a voice, distorted and cold, crackled over a radio on the belt of a fallen rogue. "He's trapped, just as we planned. Now finish it." I froze. I knew that voice. Dante knew that voice. It was Cale. The betrayal was absolute. He hadn't just been sowing dissent. He had been working with them. He had sent his Alpha into a death trap. A furious, wounded roar tore from Dante's throat. It was the sound of a king being stabbed in the back. That fury gave him a new, terrifying strength. He grabbed a huge piece of sheet metal, using it as a shield, and plowed through the line of rogues, creating a path for us. We scrambled out of the cannery and into the fading light, leaving the sounds of the ambush behind as we raced back to the one place that was no longer safe at all. Chapter 15. The Omega's Roar. We burst into the main hall of the pack house, dragging a stumbling Liam with us. The scene that awaited us was worse than any ambush. Kyle stood in the center of the room before the entire pack. He had been waiting. His face was a mask of false solemnity. When he saw us, his eyes widened in feigned shock, which quickly curdled into accusation. "He lives!" Kyle shouted, pointing a finger at Dante. "He led our warriors into a death trap set by his Omega's human lover, and yet he alone returns unharmed." He was twisting the story, painting Dante not as a survivor, but as a traitor. He is compromised, weakened by his obsession with a worthless Omega while our enemies grow stronger. I, Kale, can no longer stand by and watch him lead us to ruin. I invoke the challenge. For the good of the pack, his reign ends tonight. A roar of approval went up from half the room. They were scared, and Kale had given their fear a target. Dante shoved me behind him, his body tense, ready for a fight. He was wounded, exhausted, and emotionally shattered by the betrayal. He was in no condition for a formal challenge. Kale knew it. This wasn't a challenge. It was an execution. As Kale lunged, his claws extended, a guttural snarl on his lips, something inside me broke. All the fear, all the pain, all the years of being called weak and worthless coalesced into a single explosive point of pure rage. "No!" The word ripped from my throat, a sound so full of power it shocked even me. I threw myself between them. Every wolf in the room froze, their eyes wide with disbelief. An Omega standing between two fighting alphas? It was unthinkable. I was shaking from head to toe, but I stood my ground, my eyes locked on Kale. "You call him weak?" I demanded, my voice ringing through the cavernous hall. It didn't tremble. It thundered. "This alpha has fought a war inside his own soul for 5 years that would have crumbled any of you to dust. He walked into that trap tonight to save a life you deemed worthless, because that is what a true leader does. He fights for the weak." I turned, my gaze sweeping over the shocked faces of the pack. "You follow this coward? This traitor who makes deals with the same fanatics who want to sacrifice me to destroy this pack? He talks of strength, but he uses your fear as his weapon. Dante fights for you. Kale fights only for himself." A stunned silence fell over the room. I had planted a seed of doubt. The pack looked from Kale's snarling face to Dante's bleeding, exhausted one. They looked at me, the Omega who wasn't cowering but was roaring like a lioness. Dante was staring at me, his expression a mixture of shock, awe, and something else. Something that looked like love. It was my point of no return. I had chosen my side. I had chosen him. But my speech, my defiance, had created the one thing our enemies needed most. A moment of hesitation. A perfect distraction. In that frozen instant of stunned silence, shadows detached themselves from the doorways. The rogues. Kyle's betrayal had been twofold. He had not only sent Dante into a trap, but he had opened the front door for the enemy. Chaos erupted as the rogues attacked the divided and confused pack. Before Dante could even react, a heavy, rough-smelling bag was thrown over my head, plunging me into suffocating darkness. Strong arms lifted me, dragging me away. I screamed, but my voice was lost in the din of the battle. In finally finding my voice, in finally choosing my fate, I had only succeeded in sealing it. Chapter 16. The Altar of the Bleeding Moon. I woke up choking on the smell of damp earth and something else. Something metallic and coppery, like old blood. The rough bag was ripped from my head, and blinding torchlight stabbed at my eyes. I was lying on my back on a slab of stone so cold it leached the warmth from my body. I was in a massive cavern, its ceiling lost in the oppressive darkness above. The walls were slick with moisture, and the air was heavy, ancient. I tried to move, but my wrists and ankles were bound by thick, cold iron chains bolted directly to the stone altar. A figure loomed over me, blocking out the flickering light. He was huge, his face a roadmap of scars, his eyes glowing with the pale, hungry light of a true predator. Silas, the rogue leader. A cruel smile stretched his lips. "The vessel awakens," he purred, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. "Just in time. The moon is almost here." "Let me go," I rasped, the words feeling useless and small in the vast, silent space. He laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. "Let you go? Little Omega, your entire life has been leading to this single moment. You are the key, the beautiful, flawed key to unlocking a new era." He began to pace around the altar, his movements like those of a patient wolf circling its trapped prey. "The Blackwood Alphas, they were not always kings," he monologued, his voice filled with a fanatic's passion. "They were granted their power, their divine right to rule, by the moon goddess herself, generations ago. But the goddess is fickle. She left a loophole, a failsafe, the prophecy." He leaned in close, his foul breath washing over my face. "It says that if the fated mate of a Blackwood Alpha, an Omega mate, is sacrificed on the night of the blood moon, the divine right is revoked. The pack's power, its very life force, is untethered. It is released, free to be claimed by one who is worthy, one who is strong enough to take it." He straightened up, his chest swelling with pride. "Dante thought he could outrun fate. He tried to throw you away, to make you worthless. The fool. All he did was make you angry, make you vulnerable. He gift-wrapped you and delivered you right to my feet. The horror of it was a physical weight, crushing the air from my lungs. I was a key, a sacrifice, a thing to be used and discarded." My frantic eyes scanned the cavern, desperate for any sign of hope. And then I saw him. My heart didn't just break. It disintegrated. Across the cavern, chained to the damp rock wall, was Dante. He was slumped, his head hanging, his body a canvas of bruises and blood. The warriors who had tried to defend him were scattered on the cavern floor around him, still and silent. He was conscious, just barely. He lifted his head, his one good eye finding mine across the distance. He was defeated, beaten. His power was nothing here. He had fought, and he had lost. In his gaze, I saw the last flicker of hope die out, replaced by a soul-shattering despair that mirrored my own. We were going to die here, and it was all for nothing. Chapter 17. The Last Rejection. As the first crimson rays of the rising blood moon painted the mouth of the cave, Silas dragged another figure out of the shadows. The man stumbled and fell to his knees beside my altar. It was Liam. His face was a mask of pure, unadulterated terror. He was sobbing, his body shaking uncontrollably. He had seen the truth behind the lies, and it had broken him. "Maya, I didn't know," he cried, his voice a pathetic, broken thing. They told me they were freeing you, that he was the monster." His terrified eyes darted from the bloody altar to Silas's cruel smile, to the beaten form of Dante chained to the wall. He finally understood. He had not been a hero. He had been a pawn, a fool. A desperate, hopeless idea sparked in his eyes. He scrambled closer to me, grabbing my chained hand. "Reject him," he pleaded, his words tumbling over each other in a frantic rush. "Maya, please, reject him again. For real, this time. Tell them you don't choose him. Say you choose me. If you're not his mate in your heart, maybe the prophecy won't work. Maybe it will spare you." It was the plea of a dying man, a last, desperate grasp for a world that no longer existed, a world where love was simple, where choices mattered, where monsters could be vanquished by words. I looked at his tear-streaked face, the face of the man who had promised me safety, a life of quiet peace. He was the symbol of a life that was now an impossible dream. Then, my gaze shifted across the cavern to Dante, to the Alpha who had rejected me, lied to me, and protected me. The man who had ruined my life to save it, the one whose pain I felt as if it were my own. The bond, that stubborn, fiery thing, pulsed between us, a silent truth in a cavern of lies. There was no choice to be made. There had never truly been a choice. With a sad, gentle finality, I looked at Liam and shook my head. "I can't," I whispered. "He is my mate." It was the first time I had said it, the first time I had fully, completely admitted it to myself and to the world. A quiet acceptance settled over me. Across the cavern, Dante heard me. Through his pain and haze, the words reached him. His head snapped up. A surge of impossible strength coursed through him, and he pulled against his chains, his muscles straining. "Take me instead!" he roared, his voice a thunderous, desperate bellow that echoed off the stone walls. "Silas, a life for a life. Take my wolf, take my soul, but let her go." Chapter 18. A fate worse than death. Silas merely laughed, a cold, dismissive sound that mocked Dante's sacrifice. "Your pathetic death is not the prize I seek, Blackwood. I want your throne, your legacy. And for that, the prophecy must be fulfilled. The vessel must pay the price." He raised a gleaming obsidian dagger, its edge wickedly sharp in the torchlight. He loomed over me, the red moonlight beginning to flood the cavern, bathing us all in a bloody glow. This was it. The end. Just as he poised the blade over my heart, 3 figures appeared at the mouth of the cave. They seemed to step out of the shadows themselves, tall and imposing, their faces completely hidden by the deep hoods of their gray cloaks. A chilling silence fell over the cavern. Even Silas froze, his arm outstretched. The rogues instinctively backed away, their heads bowed in submission. "The tribunal," someone whispered in terror. They were ancient, older than any pack, older than any alpha. They were the enforcers of the old laws, the arbiters of fate itself. They did not move, did not speak, yet their presence was an absolute, crushing authority. They were not here to save me. They were here to watch. Silas, recovering his composure, addressed them with a respectful bow. "Venerable ones, as you see, the prophecy unfolds. The fated Omega of the Blackwood line is here, on the night of the blood moon. I am here to claim the right." One of the figures raised a hand, a simple gesture that stopped him cold. It turned its hooded head, not toward me, but toward Dante. A voice, dry as dust and old as stone, echoed in all our minds without a single mouth moving. "The prophecy is the law, but a greater law has been broken here." The figure pointed a long, pale finger at Dante. "An alpha has failed to protect his fated mate. He has allowed her to be captured for sacrifice. His negligence has endangered a sacred bond." A cold, legalistic dread filled the air. This was a trial. Silas looked confused. "The punishment?" he asked. The tribunal's collective voice answered, a chilling, emotionless verdict. Forfeiture. My heart leaped. They were going to stop it. But the voice continued, and my hope turned to ash. Not of his life, of his birthright, of his wolf. A fate worse than death. A punishment so cruel it was spoken of only in whispers. They were going to unmake him. Before anyone could react, the 3 figures raised their hands. They began a low, guttural chant, a language of pure power that made the very air vibrate. The torches flickered wildly. A shimmering, ethereal energy crackled around Dante. He screamed. It was not a sound of pain, but of pure, soul-tearing agony. A phantom, glowing image of a great black wolf, his very soul, was being ripped from his body. He convulsed against his chains, his body arching, his screams echoing in the cavern as his spirit was being torn apart. I watched, helpless, my own screams caught in my throat. This was my fault, my capture, his failure, his punishment. I was about to lose him forever, to watch him become a hollow shell, a fate worse than any death the rogues had planned. In that moment of pure, blinding horror, a single resolute thought cut through my panic. "Stop!" My voice ripped through the air, raw and commanding, shattering the chant. The cavern fell silent. The ethereal energy faded. Dante collapsed against his chains, gasping. Every eye, every hooded face turned to me. "The law requires a sacrifice," I said, my voice shaking but clear. "The prophecy demands a vessel. I offer myself. I will pay the price. Take me and leave him be." Chapter 19. The Unwritten Prophecy. My voice echoed in the cavern's profound silence. Take me and leave him be. Every eye was on me, the Omega on the altar. Silas's face was a mask of fury and confusion. The tribunal stood like stone statues, their hooded heads tilted as if listening to something no one else could hear. Dante was staring at me, his body still trembling from the horrific ritual, his golden eyes wide with a desperate, pleading denial. He shook his head, a silent, agonized no. I ignored him. I had to. I pulled myself up as best I could against the chains, my gaze fixed on the man I had spent 5 years trying to hate. The man I had just condemned myself to die for. In that moment, with death a certainty, there was no room left for lies. Not to him. Not to myself. "I love you," I said. And the words were not a whisper. They rang through the cavern, clear and true, filled with a strength I never knew I possessed. I ran from it. I fought it. I tried to build a whole new life to escape it. But it was always the truth. I looked at his broken form, and my heart ached with a love so fierce it eclipsed all fear. "You were a fool, Dante, a proud, arrogant fool, but you were my fool, and I was yours." A single tear traced a path through the grime on my cheek. "A life without you isn't a life I want to live. I am not a vessel. I am not a sacrifice for your enemies. I am your mate, and this is my choice. I choose you, in life and in this." It was the ultimate act of acceptance, a willing heart offered freely not for a prophecy, but for love. An Omega choosing to lay down her life to save her Alpha's soul. It was the one variable no one had ever considered. The prophecy was about a blood sacrifice to break a bond, but my choice, my declaration, was an affirmation of that bond, stronger than any rejection, more powerful than any ritual. A subtle shift occurred in the air. The 3 hooded figures of the tribunal stirred. Their collective voice echoed in our minds again, no longer cold and clinical, but filled with a strange, ancient resonance. The law is fulfilled, but not as it was written. A sacrifice of the heart has been offered. The bond is not severed. It is affirmed. Silas's face contorted in rage. "No, the prophecy demands blood, not words." The tribunal's voice was final. The prophecy demanded a choice, and a choice has been made. Chapter 20. The Goddess's Grace. Just as the tribunal's final word faded, the cavern changed. The angry red light of the blood moon pouring in through the cave's mouth suddenly softened, transforming into a beam of pure, brilliant silver. It cut through the smoky darkness, a column of divine light that struck the altar where I lay. It was the light of the moon goddess herself. A gasp rippled through the cavern. The light was warm, impossibly warm. It washed over me, and where it touched the cold iron chains that bound me simply, dissolved into dust. The light then expanded, flowing from me to Dante, enveloping us both in its gentle, powerful embrace. The chains on his wrists and ankles evaporated, but that was nothing compared to the miracle happening inside me. The burning, agonizing pain of the broken bond, the constant torment that had been my companion for 5 years, vanished. It was replaced by a tidal wave of pure, ecstatic bliss. It was a feeling of coming home, of being made whole. I felt his strength, his relief, his overwhelming love pouring into me. His wolf, no longer dying, purred in his chest, its spirit intertwining with mine. And I felt my own essence, my own quiet Omega strength flow back into him, a soothing balm on his wounded soul. We were one. Complete. Dante stood up, his wounds closing, his exhaustion evaporating. The haunted, broken look in his eyes was gone, replaced by a blazing, godlike power. A faint silver aura shimmered around him. He was no longer just an alpha. He was the goddess's chosen. Silas watched this transformation, his face shifting from disbelief to pure, unadulterated fury. His prize, the divine power he had schemed and killed for, had been given to his most hated enemy. The prophecy had backfired, strengthening the very line he had sought to destroy. "No!" he roared, a sound of pure animalistic rage. "That power was meant for me!" All pretense of ritual and destiny was gone. All that remained was raw, violent ambition. He threw his head back, his body twisting and contorting, bones snapping and reforming with sickening speed. Where the man had stood, a massive, scarred wolf now crouched, its eyes burning with red-hot hatred. "If I cannot have the pack's power by right, Blackwood," it snarled, its voice a deep, guttural growl, "then I will take it from your corpse." With a final, hate-filled roar, the great beast lunged. Chapter 21. King of the Mountain. Dante didn't flinch. He met Silas's charge with an inhuman calm, his body undergoing the same violent, beautiful transformation. He grew, his form shifting into that of a massive black wolf, larger and more powerful than Silas, his fur tipped with silver that seemed to drink in the goddess's light. A shimmering silver aura pulsed around him. He was magnificent. A king. They met in the center of the cavern with a crash that shook the very stone. It was a primal ballet of claws and teeth, a whirlwind of black and gray fur. The remaining rogues started to move forward to help their leader, but the tribunal raised their hands in unison. An invisible wall slammed into place, sealing the two fighting alphas in an arena of combat. This was a duel for supremacy, a trial by combat that would have only one victor. I watched, my heart pounding in my chest, but the terror was gone. I could feel Dante through our newly forged bond. I felt his strength, his focus, his unwavering certainty. He wasn't just fighting for his life anymore. He was fighting for his legacy. He was fighting for his pack. He was fighting for us. The silver light of the goddess seemed to fuel him, giving him a speed and power that Silas could not match. He was no longer the dying beast, crippled by a broken bond. He was whole. He was complete, and he was furious. Silas was strong, a brute forged in hatred and ambition. But Dante was an alpha-born, now blessed by a goddess. He was faster, smarter, and driven by something more powerful than greed. He was driven by love. He dodged a clumsy, furious lunge from Silas, his own claws raking across the rogue alpha's flank. Silas howled in pain and rage, spinning to snap at him. Dante was already moving, anticipating the attack. He ducked under the snapping jaws and drove his powerful shoulders into Silas's chest, knocking the bigger wolf off balance. For a single, critical second, Silas's throat was exposed. Dante did not hesitate. With a final, decisive roar, he lunged. His jaws, empowered by his rage and his renewed strength, closed around Silas's throat. There was a sickening crunch of bone, and the great gray wolf went limp. It was over. Dante stood over the body of his fallen rival, blood dripping from his muzzle. He threw back his great black head and let out a triumphant howl. It was a sound that did more than echo off the cavern walls. It was a roar of victory, a declaration of his power, a reclaiming of his throne. It was the sound of a king who had returned to his mountain. Slowly he shifted back, his human form still radiating that faint silver light. He was exhausted, battered, but victorious. His golden eyes, now clear and bright, found mine across the cavern. The external threat was gone, but the traitors at home were still waiting. Without a word, he walked to me and took my hand. And together we walked out of the cave of death and into the silver moonlight, to face the final judgment. Chapter 22. The Alpha's Vow. We walked back into the pack house hand in hand. The sounds of fighting had died, leaving a tense, watchful silence. Kyle stood by the great stone hearth, the traditional place of the Alpha, trying to rally the fractured and fearful pack members around him. He was spinning a tale of how Dante had fallen, how the rogues had won, and how he, Kyle, was their only hope. His speech died in his throat when he saw us. A collective gasp went through the room. We were not dead. We were whole. Dante radiated a calm, quiet power that was more intimidating than any roar. A faint, silver aura, the goddess's blessing, still clung to him. The pack instinctively parted for us as we walked to the center of the hall. Kale's face went pale, his bravado crumbling into fear. Everyone expected a battle. They expected Dante to tear the traitor apart. Dante looked at Kale, his eyes cold with a final, lethal judgment. But then he did something no one expected. He turned his back on the traitor. He turned to me. In front of his warriors, his elders, and the man who had tried to usurp him, Dante Blackwood, the alpha of the Blood Moon Pack, went down on one knee. He bowed his head, an act of submission so profound, so unheard of, it stunned the entire pack into absolute silence. He took my hand, his grip gentle, and lifted it to his lips. When he looked up at me, his golden eyes were shining with unshed tears, stripped of all pride and filled with 5 years of regret. His voice, when he spoke, was not the roar of an alpha, but the raw, broken plea of a man. "I rejected you before this pack," he said, his voice thick with emotion, ringing through the silent hall. "Now, before this pack, I beg for your forgiveness." He shook his head, a self-deprecating smile touching his lips. "I called you weak, a half measure. I was the weak one. I was the half measure of a man, ruled by fear. You, Maya, you are the strongest person I have ever known." He rose to his feet, his hands moving to cup my face, his thumbs gently brushing away the tears I didn't know I was crying. "You are my heart. You are my soul. You are my queen." He leaned in, his forehead resting against mine. "You are more than enough," he whispered, the words a sacred vow that healed the last, deepest scar on my soul. "You are everything." With a tenderness that made my heart ache, he tilted my head and leaned in. I felt the sharp prick of his teeth against my neck, a brief, sharp pain that immediately dissolved into a wave of pure, ecstatic bliss. The mark sealed. The bond was whole. The goddess's light flared between us, and in that moment, we were not just a mated pair. We were a king and his queen, united and complete. Chapter 23. A Pack Reborn. The entire pack watched the marking, this incredible act of public devotion, in stunned, reverent silence. They saw the silver aura that flared around us, a clear and undeniable sign of the moon goddess's favor. They saw an alpha who did not rule by fear, but by love, an alpha who knelt for his Luna. The public rejection had been reversed. The shame had been washed away and replaced with honor. One of the oldest warriors, a grizzled wolf I had known since I was a child, was the first. He slowly dropped to one knee, bowing his head. Then another followed, and another. In a great, silent wave, the entire pack, even those who had supported Kale, knelt before us. They were not just bowing to their alpha, they were bowing to their Luna. To me. The pack was no longer broken. It was reborn, united under a new kind of strength. Dante, his arms securely around my waist, finally turned his attention to the lone standing figure. Kyle. He stood alone, abandoned by his followers, his face a mask of disbelief and defeated rage. Dante's voice was cold as ice, the voice of a king passing judgment. "You betrayed your family. You made a deal with fanatics and led your brothers into a death trap. You conspired to murder your alpha and sacrifice your Luna. You have broken every sacred law we hold." Kyle spat on the floor. "She made you weak." Dante shook his head, a look of pity on his face. "She made me whole. You will never understand that." He didn't need to raise his voice. His quiet authority was absolute. "Death would be a mercy, and you have earned no mercy from me. You are nameless, clanless. You are exiled from this territory and from the memory of this pack. Your name will never be spoken here again. If you are found on any allied territory, you will be hunted. You will live as a rogue, and you will die alone in the dark." Two of Dante's warriors, their faces grim, grabbed Cale's arms. They dragged the now nameless wolf out of the great hall, his curses and screams echoing until they were finally silenced by the heavy doors closing behind him. The internal threat was gone. Order was restored. Dante looked out at his kneeling pack. Then he looked at me, a soft, loving smile on his face. It was time to go home. Chapter 24. The Luna's Mark. Later that night, the world was finally quiet. The pack house was silent, the warriors asleep, the traitors gone. We were in the Alpha's chambers, our chambers, and the only sound was the soft crackle of the fire in the hearth. After all the chaos, all the bloodshed and betrayal and terror, the peace was the most beautiful thing I had ever experienced. There was no need for words. Dante sat in a large armchair by the fire, and I was curled up against his chest, his arms wrapped securely around me. The bond between us was no longer a source of pain or confusion. It was a gentle, constant hum beneath my skin, a quiet river of warmth and love and contentment. It was a silent conversation, a constant awareness of his soul next to mine. It was bliss. I tilted my head back, tracing the fresh mark on his neck with my finger. It was a perfect crescent of teeth, a symbol of his vow. "Is it always like this?" I whispered, my voice soft in the quiet room. He pressed a kiss to the top of my head, his own voice a low, happy rumble in his chest. "I've only ever had a broken one before," he murmured. "But with you, I think it will be even better." We fell silent again, just breathing together. My transformation was complete. I was no longer the shamed Omega, the girl who wasn't enough. I was the Luna of the Blood Moon Pack, loved, revered, and strong in my own right. And Dante's transformation was just as profound. The fearful, arrogant boy was gone, replaced by a king worthy of his crown, a devoted, loving mate. He gently tilted my chin up, his golden eyes soft and warm in the firelight. "I'm sorry it took me so long to find my way back to you," he whispered. "I was lost without you, Maya." "We were both lost," I answered, my hand coming up to cup his cheek. "But we're home now." He leaned in and kissed me, a soft, slow, promising kiss that spoke of a lifetime of sunrises, of quiet moments like this one, of a future built together. It was a kiss of healing, a kiss of forever. As we pulled apart, I rested my head against his shoulder, my gaze drifting to my reflection in the dark glass of the window. I saw us, wrapped together in the firelight. But I saw something else, too. On my shoulder, near the beautiful, perfect mark of my mate, was another mark. It was a delicate, intricate swirl of silver, so faint it was almost invisible, like a ghost of a tattoo against my skin. It didn't hurt. It didn't burn. It just was. A quiet, mysterious brand left behind not by an Alpha's teeth, but by the ancient, unknowable power of the tribunal. A silent reminder of the laws we had bent, of the fate we had rewritten. Our battle was won. But I had a feeling our story was far from over. Thank you so much for watching this video. We really appreciate you spending your time with us. If you enjoyed what you saw, we've got a whole library of other videos packed with more great content just like this waiting for you on our channel. So, why not dive into another one right now? And hey, if you want to make sure you don't miss out on our next upload, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. We'd love to have you join our community and see you in the next video. Thanks again.